Hey there, Nostalgics! Welcome back to another episode of Nostalgic Blast, where we take a look at the best and worst in gaming. This review today is going to be a particularly special one, as the game that we're going to be talking about today, Ridge Racer, is a genre-defining game that completely redefined what it means to create a good racing game, and it's just a classic staple on the original PlayStation. Ridge Racer in itself is actually a very iconic title for many things that it innovated back in the day, with its driving controls, 3D environments, and bringing an arcade game experience to your PlayStation, as it originally released back in 1993 through Namco, and was eventually ported to the PlayStation 1 back in 1994. Ever since then, Ridge Racer has been highly acclaimed by many people over the years. But the question I aim to answer today, despite this iconic status that it has, is does the original Ridge Racer on the PS1 still hold up today, and should you check it out? No matter what I say about Ridge Racer today in this video, something to keep in mind that this game truly did define the racing genre back in the day, spawning an entire new series and setting the bar high for new arcade games of the late 90s, and of course, good PS1 racing titles. In fact, the reception of the game back in the day when it originally came out on the PS1 was pretty good, all things considered. Despite how aged some of the environments and the tracks look from the original PlayStation days, Ridge Racer on the PS1 visually holds up incredibly well, considering that this was one of the first racing games to come out that experimented with this new 3D style of technology, trying to innovate the arcade game to the PlayStation 1, bringing forth all sorts of brand new environments for racing fans to enjoy, from bustling mountains to wide open seas, open highways, the car designs themselves as well as the various tracks. They wanted this game to look as visually stimulating as possible, combining the realism with cool and iconic locations from around the globe. And I think they pulled it off extremely well. While some environments may look pretty aged, especially considering this is early 3D PS1 we're talking here, and an old arcade game to boot, the fact of the matter is this game visually looks incredibly impressive for the time, and the soundtrack to Ridge Racer is no exception. I still think the visuals hold up today despite the early 3D, and the music just adds to that. With the realism that they were going for, you have awesome upbeat tracks to get you pumped up to continue racing through all the different modes that are available to you. You have music from all sorts of different genres with that classic arcadey feeling, and to be honest, that's something I really enjoy about Ridge Racer. The environments and the music still hold up to this day, so in terms of visuals and soundtrack, despite how old Ridge Racer is now, it still holds up pretty well.
Let it hit 'em.
Now, considering this is a racing game that's considered to be extremely iconic and genre-defining, when it comes to something like a racing game, there's not really going to be any plot to talk about, but the main core thing that a racing game has to get right, outside of a good soundtrack, maybe visually looking impressive, is going to be the gameplay, specifically when it comes to customization and actually racing. Now, how well does Ridge Racer hold up in this department? Considering the technology we're dealing with here, and Ridge Racer as a whole, the gameplay is actually pretty good, especially when it comes to the car controls and the different modes that are available to you. The controls of this game had to be changed up in order to accommodate a console, but each of the cars feel extremely responsive going around corners. They accelerate and boost very well, going through the various stage hazards and environments that you're going to be traveling through, whether or not you're facing off against opponents or diving over a cliff in order to avoid a body of water. The controls in this game is something that I think still holds up pretty well, and it's something that a racing game has to get well extremely, especially when it comes to the core gameplay itself of going around a track. The controls do hold up fairly well, although, to be honest, some parts of them haven't really aged as well. The corners are a little tight, the cars definitely have a lot more weight and momentum to them, so the controls can get cumbersome depending on the track design, but it still holds up pretty well. And the core racing itself is something that you would expect from an old arcade racing game. I mean, it works pretty well. You have various different modes and cars that you can select from, getting high scores, time attack modes where you try and complete a track at a certain amount of time, classic races where you go against either other players or computer players, so that all holds up extremely well for the core racing experience. And the core gameplay, when it comes to the controls as well as the racing itself, Ridge Racer for an early PlayStation 1 title holds up extremely well in this department too. And some of you may not think so upon seeing the visuals of this one, but I can assure you, this game is a classic for a reason, and despite how aged parts of it are, like with the controls and the visuals, Ridge Racer as a core racing experience and a classic game, it still holds up pretty damn well.
3, 2, 1, go! Wow, what a start! This is just what I wanted to see! 2 laps to go! Corner stop! Watch yourself!
So, after all that, this begs the question, do I recommend that you guys go back and play Ridge Racer, and is it good? And I say yes on both fronts. Ridge Racer, despite how aged it might be in some areas, considering again early arcade title and early PS1 title, despite how aged the visuals look with the different 3D environments and the controls not always being as responsive, given the fact that we're going for a more arcadey experience, Ridge Racer is a solid racing game in itself that brings a lot to the table for a classic arcade experience for people who have never really played this one. And considering its availability on the PS1, that really does say a lot. The game visually still looks pretty good, has a good soundtrack to it, and has a classic racing experience with all sorts of extra modes that you can just find yourself lost in for hours on end if it's something that you want to sink your teeth into. I do recommend you guys go back and check out Ridge Racer if you've never experienced it before, and if you really enjoy racing games. This is definitely one that you guys shouldn't sleep on. Ridge Racer, despite a few minor issues here and there, holds up very well, and it's a good game. I can definitely recommend this one to just about anybody, especially if you're a racing enthusiast who wants to have a good classic racing arcade experience. And that is it today for the review, Nostalgics. Thank you guys so much for checking this one out. It was really cool to cover a classic game here on the show. A lot of the ones that we've been covering lately have been more obscure licensed games and that kind of thing. But the fact of the matter is, Ridge Racer, I think, falls into both categories. It's becoming more of an obscure and niche racing game that is only really talked about because of the legacy it has, not really so much for the quality of the game itself. But Ridge Racer is a good racing game. You guys should definitely check it out if you have the time. Pick it up on the PS1. Of course, if you want the original arcade experience, I'm sure there are various methods in which you could do that. But otherwise, guys, thank you once again for checking out this video today. It's much appreciated. Let me in the comment section down below what you guys think of Ridge Racer, and if you've played it before, and overall what you think about it. And if there are any other good racing games out there that I should cover here on the show. Because it's a genre that I'm not as familiar with, but I'd be extremely curious to see what else is out there. But outside of that, guys, let me know what you think in the comments. Give the video a like if you did enjoy it, and subscribe to the channel if you want to keep up with future videos like collection pickups, retro reviews, and everything else we do here on the channel. And that's all from me. And until next time, guys, this has been Ryan from the Nostalgia Factor saying, keep on gaming.